Hi. So, what I'd like to talk to you today about is the recent teacher strikes. And I'd like to put the teacher strikes from 2018 and 2019 into a bit of historical context and maybe even more importantly, policy context. So teachers hold a very different position in public service. They, uh, they don't have the same kind of respect from the public as police and firefighters do. Because police officers and firefighters are often thought of as, putting their lives on the line every day, and they do really dangerous work at times. So, the police officer who gives you a ticket for speeding might not be risking their life at that moment, but at any time they could be put in a life-threatening situation. And firefighters obviously oftentimes act as emergency medical units. They show up at car crashes and things like that, rather than fighting fires in a lot of communities. But nonetheless, if there is a fire, they have to put their lives in danger running into burning buildings. So teachers, on the other hand, deal with children in schools that are relatively safe, though, of course, we've seen in recent decades the rise of school shootings, which means that some of our teachers are put in dangerous situations. Nonetheless, we don't publicly think of teachers in the same way we do as these other public servants. So, police officers and firefighters often get a lot more sympathy when it comes to labor disputes, the disagreements in wages and working conditions and things like that. So, another thing to note is that historically teaching has been, especially K through 12, a more female-dominated profession. Elementary school teachers tend to be women, and so you have a more even gender split than you do with firefighters and police, which tend to be male-dominated. So you have historically a sexist component to public support for raising the wages of police and firefighters rather than teachers. And of course, you may even know some people who view teachers as like glorified babysitters, and that they have summers off and they don't have to deal with a lot of stress. They're just watching children all day. So, despite this, though, teachers' unions tend to be pretty strong in the United States. So they have a lot of political power, and in some states they have collective bargaining rights, and in some states they don't. And so what I want to start with is a little bit of historical context. There was a wave of teacher strikes across the United States in the 1960s and 70s when public sector collective bargaining rights were starting to get adopted by states, extending them to public employees, including the categories the professions that I mentioned previously. So some of these more notable strikes were in New York, Philadelphia, St. Louis in the 1970s. And it left public officials at the time, mayors and governors, it left them really trying to figure out, how do we keep our schools open? Because if you have, in some school districts, 2 or 3 strikes in a year or the span of a couple of years, you're closing down the schools a lot. And then what do the parents do about their kids when the teachers are on strike? It really inconveniences a lot of people, which is one of the points of striking, of course, is to inconvenience a lot of people to show how important your job really is. That, hey, if we stop working, then the gears of society come to a halt. One of the reasons that a lot of federal government shutdowns recently have been dragging on is that a lot of the people that are in important positions that are considered necessary and many of them are. I put that in quotes because it's tough to figure out what's necessary and what's not. Like, anyway, for the operation of the federal government. But one thing's for sure: if you shut down airport security, the government shutdown would end. Government shutdowns would end a lot faster. But the TSA agents show up to work because they're deemed necessary for keeping the country operating. So there's an interesting dynamic there when it comes to public employees and labor action. So we had a lot of teachers in the 60s and 70s stopping public education by going on strike because to show their power, to show that, look, we're underpaid, we have large class sizes, and we're dealing with your children, we're part of your children's future, and we deserve to be treated more professionally. And so states started passing collective bargaining rights for teachers. And as they adopted these collective bargaining rights, it gave teachers a formal seat at the table to collectively bargain for their wages, their benefits, but also curriculum issues and class sizes, because teachers want smaller class sizes because they can focus more on the individual students. So it's more than just wages and benefits. It's also a part of having control over other things related to children's education. A lot of those being things that parents would like too. Their child getting more direct one-on-one time with the teacher. If you have smaller class sizes, you can do that. But of course, wages are a big part of these labor actions, and that's directly related to the teacher's standard of living. So states started passing these collective bargaining rights, giving formal bargaining to public school teachers, so they had a seat at the table, so they could negotiate pay and benefits and class size. Some of these states also they also put restrictions on striking. So in return, so on one hand, the teachers ended up with, through their labor action, they ended up with collective bargaining rights so they could negotiate raises with their employer. But in return, they also had strict strike penalties within these policies. So yeah, you get to come to the table, but if we can't come to an agreement and you all go on strike, we're going to fire you all, or some other kind of penalty for going on strike. So there was a big motivation for teachers to make sure they come to an agreement at the bargaining table now that they have bargaining rights, because they weren't supposed to lean back on the strike. Now, when they're really desperate, when teachers are really desperate, they might call the state's bluff and say, well, striking is illegal, but we got nothing to lose, so we're just going to go on strike anyway, and you go ahead and fire all of us, because how are you going to replace all of us? That would be a mess. So, if you can work through collective action, you might still be able to get what you want at the bargaining table. So it was a trade-off: bargaining rights for strict strike provisions. Fast forward to 2018, 2019, and we saw a new wave of teacher strikes. So probably coming a lot from being influenced by what happened in Wisconsin in 2011 when they took away collective bargaining rights for public employees besides firefighters and police officers. So there were massive demonstrations in 2011. And a lot of those people doing that demonstrating were teachers. So in the years that followed, it kind of demonstrated that that there is some strength in numbers. Even though the Wisconsin teachers lost their fight, they made a lot of national news, and there was a lot of uproar over what Wisconsin was doing. So this kind of emboldened teachers around the country to start using more militant tactics to get what they want, and in some cases need. So I'm going to run through some of the states that have gone on strike with their teachers, where the teachers in the state have gone on strike in 2018 and 2019, and what they earned out of striking. So the wave started, the wave of teacher strikes in 2018 that has bled into 2019, started with West Virginia. West Virginia, all the public school teachers in West Virginia went on strike, and enough of them did so that they closed schools in every county in West Virginia, the whole state. And those schools were closed for about 2 weeks before the state legislature came to an agreement with them. Now, imagine the position that puts the students and the state and the governor and the parents of all the kids that were supposed to be in school. Now they have to find somebody to watch their kids. Remember, the point of demonstrations is to inconvenience other people. That's part of the point. You're showing how important it is that you show up and do your job for society. So so that made national news, and that was a very big thing in 2018. The West Virginia teachers ended up winning a 5% pay raise. Now, I'm going to focus on the pay raises that they win, but these policies include other things like class sizes and other working condition type things, funding for education that I'll also kind of mention, but we'll focus on the pay raises, as those usually are the things that make the headlines. So West Virginia closed schools for about 2 weeks, ended up with a 5% pay raise. Colorado followed up with a 2% pay raise and increased school funding following strikes across their state. Oklahoma got an increase in school funding and teacher raises of $6,000. And the thing about that is the teacher raises were actually already coming. So then their focus turned to increase education spending, and when they ended their strike and went back to work, then the teachers union decided to turn their focus to mobilizing for elections, trying to get people who support teachers in public office. Virginia, teachers went on strike and ended up with a 5% pay raise. And then Arizona teachers went on strike and ended up with a 20% pay raise. So teachers across the country started going on strike and flexing their muscle a little bit for the first time in decades, really. Now, there were others. There's Los Angeles teachers went on strike, and Chicago teachers went on strike actually in 2012. Those are in more teacher union friendly states, but you'll notice that a lot of these ones making the headlines, a lot of these states that are having teachers go on strike across the state are more red. They're more conservative states, and those states lack collective bargaining rights for teachers. So it comes back to the theme of, do teachers union, does collective bargaining lead to labor relations problems like a labor strife, or does labor strife end up strengthening a union? The thing that they resort to, they reach into their toolbox, and they don't have any rights at the bargaining table. So what do they have? Well, they can withhold their work. So that's what they did. So they left a lot of red states without a lot of options because so many of them didn't show up. The other thing to note is that a lot of these states also fund education, are some of the lowest funded education states in the country, and also have some of the lowest teacher salaries. Very, very low teacher salaries in places like Oklahoma compared to other states that have stronger teacher unions. And that's not just, like, better pay for teachers is not just something that's good for the individual teacher. We all want more money, right? Like, most of us probably agree like more money is a good thing. So, we can all use a little extra money to put down on our mortgage. But one of the issues with teachers is that if you want a strong education system in the state and you pay your teachers the 50th salaries, 50 out of 50, you're the lowest in the country or one of the lowest, then you're going to have a tough time attracting qualified teachers. Good teachers that could go somewhere else are going to find a job in another state where they pay their teachers better. So it's part of an economic system based on competition. It is part of capitalism. So if you want to compete, you have to take care of your teachers. So anyway, we see these waves in states that mostly don't fund their education very well, and that has forced the hand, and now that's emboldened other teachers around the country. And so moving forward, we'll see what happens as teachers continue to organize and see what kind of power they have besides collectively bargaining. All right, thanks.